I think one of the biggest misconceptions that I have come to learn is that individuals sometimes really believe that there is just that perfect college and that that's going to guarantee their success. In reality, there's just so much opportunity for students to thrive, regardless of where they go. There's so much opportunity at so many places. And I think that we tend to shy away from that a little bit if it's not that name brand, institution.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Office Hours, where we explore the key trends shaping higher ed and what those trends mean for students and families. Today was a really interesting conversation with Kasey Urquídez, who shared her insights on the myth of the perfect college, her thoughts on the Workforce Pell, views on major selection, and much, much more. Let's jump right in. Hey everyone, my name is Will Geiger, co-founder of Scholarships 360. I'm really excited to be joined today by Kasey Urquídez. Kasey's the Senior Director of Higher Education at ACT. She has decades of enrollment management experience. She's on the board for Coalition for College, as well as NACAC, and was most recently the Chief Enrollment Officer at the University of Arizona. So excited for this conversation, and welcome, Kasey.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
So to kick things off, I'm really curious about do a little myth busting. I know that as a school counselor and admissions professional, I feel like half my job is just doing myth busting. And um, so what is one big myth or misconception that students have about the college admissions process?
Yeah. Well, I thought a lot about this because there are a lot of myths out there. And I think one of the biggest misconceptions that I have come to learn is that individuals sometimes really believe that there is just that perfect college and that that's going to guarantee their success. And so I think that it's in reality, there's just so much opportunity for students to thrive, regardless of where they go. And of course, you want to have a good fit. You want to feel like it's a good place for you, but there's so much opportunity at so many places. And I think that we tend to shy away from that a little bit if it's not that name brand, institution. And a lot of students find great opportunities there, but you don't have to be there to do just what you think is the ideal, right? And so there's, just ways to get involved and mentorship and all these kinds of things at so many places. And so I think that's one of the biggest ones. But I also think that there's also the myth that the higher the cost, the more opportunities or benefits a student's going to have. And so I think there's just ways to look at that. Sometimes that is the best place for a student, and that's awesome. I really encourage that. But and if it makes sense for the family finances, but if it doesn't, there is so much opportunity to do things a different way. And so I would just say those two things. There's not that perfect thing that you're going to always find. You might fit, and it might be that way, but open your mind and think about those a little bit more. And then how does those finances really fit into the picture, the big picture?
Yeah, I think that's such great advice. And there's just, there's that literally thousands of colleges in the
Yeah.
US. I think unfortunately sometimes we like focus on a very small handful of like
Mhm.
amazing institutions, but institutions that are serving a pretty small percent of the country.
Mhm.
So I think that's great advice. Kind of related, I think that something that's a little bit overlooked sometimes is thinking about college major. And I know there's been a lot of research and data just that shows that major, even more so than the college you attend, is predictive of earnings, ROI, and such.
Yeah.
I'm curious, just from your perspective, like how why major selection continues to be so important, perhaps like especially at a time when the world
Yeah.
of work is changing so quickly.
Sure. Yeah, major selection is always such a big question mark. And I think that regardless of major, when you're going to college and you're studying in a field, whatever field that is, it does provide you with focus and discipline and kind of a framework for learning and moving forward in the future. And so I think that the one thing that we know that employers continuously look for is that ability to think critically, to solve problems, to work with one another, and to adapt. And so any of the majors that students choose are going to hopefully provide those kinds of things to them. But of course, in the world that we're in, there's just so much that is rapidly changing, and technology is a huge piece. And all these things that where you need these transferable skills. And so I still am a proponent of studying what you love. If it's history, then you might just be more involved with digital storytelling, and but in order to do all these things, you really need to make sure that you're, as a student or family, encouraging students to participate in internships and do, getting some micro credentials and those kinds of things, because that really will diversify the major and help enhance the work that's being done. But again, all the majors are going to, lead to that discipline and focus that are so critical. But being able to ensure that you're preparing for the workforce in addition means that there's some extra things that you can do. And so many colleges, universities, organizations are offering those to students to take them up on it and to do those things so that in this rapidly changing world, your major and your all the skills that you need to be successful are packaged together.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. Appreciate you calling out history. I was a history major, and I think
Oh, really?
sometimes there's yeah, I think sometimes just that the questioning whether the liberal arts are,
Yep.
have a place in sort of the future of work. And
Hmm.
I agree that a lot of the fundamentals of like communication, working with others. I think in history, one of the great
Yep.
things is you think about like change over time, which is important, is like pretty transferable.
Right.
I know that we sometimes also get questions from students who worry about their major just becoming like obsolete
Hmm.
in the near future, just like not knowing where things are going. And just, yeah, curious if there's any different
Hmm.
advice you might have for students who worry about the durability of the
Hmm.
the skills that they're developing.
Sure. Yeah, and it can be scary because we often hear how many jobs have not even been created yet. And students are 17, 18-year-old thinking about, like, gosh, what does that mean for me if I'm just starting my college experience? But I think I'd go back just to very similar to what I mentioned before, and using history and digital storytelling, for example, or English, and being able to utilize different design and AI, and how you pull all that together for different companies or organizations. And so being able to focus on those things, I think that if you're not going about the things that really excite you and interest you, then it's more difficult to really buy into it and get excited about the work you're doing in college. And so I mentioned this before, but those micro credentials, being able to get some additional certificates or digital badges and those kinds of things that while studying what you love. And then oftentimes individuals find that they love the other parts of it too. And so as they're getting those micro credentials, doing those extra things into like emerging fields that may not be even around as they start college, but as they're juniors in college, they're really starting to surface, getting that so you can really future proof education.
Yeah, I love the calling out the micro credentials, and I think that's, even something students can think about earlier on, like maybe even in high school. There's,
Yeah,
edX,
absolutely.
Coursera, lots.
Hmm.
There's, so many opportunities that like
Yeah,
might be free or really low cost, where you can sort of test, different types
right.
of focuses.
And there are, I should mention too, I mean, I currently work for ACT, and ACT does offer those kinds of credentials and things through Work Keys, which is another great opportunity through the states or different districts that are offering that for students as they're in high school.
Yeah, no, that's a great. So for something like that, the student wanted to, or a parent wanted to learn more. Is that something you think like, school counselor guidance, like a vice principal, might be able to point them in the right direction for more local resources?
Mhm. Oftentimes, yes. And if for some chance that the state or the institution, school doesn't have a great understanding of it, it's all available on the ACT website as well. And then it can get connected with someone.
Cool. Yeah, we'll definitely include those in the show notes afterwards.
Great. Yeah.
Um, I know one of there's been a lot of changes from legislative perspective this summer in higher ed. One of those that I think is kind of interesting is the Workforce Pell, which now brings some federal funding to non-degree programs at accredited institutions. I'm just kind of curious, like, how are you seeing this play out at institutions where perhaps there's more incentive to create some of these additional pathways for
Mhm.
credential?
Yeah, I think there's a lot that's happening out there, and I think the Workforce Pell really is a game changer and a great opportunity for very short term, skills focused types of programming that students can really do something for an in demand job. I think the really important thing for institutions as they're thinking about this, because so many are trying to figure out where do we go next and how do we build these out, community colleges including. Is that they have to be things that are not just in demand in the moment, but things that are really going to help educate the student to sustain them. So, even going back to some of the things we talked about, you can do micro credentials and other kinds of things during this time as well. But utilizing the the opportunity is, I think it's going to be pretty huge. There's a lot of 18-year-olds that just aren't quite sure, or I shouldn't even just say 18-year-olds. There's a lot of 30 years or whatever that just aren't quite sure what they want to do in terms of that higher education. And so that's part of the evolving, higher education landscape. And so being able to utilize Workforce Pell to have some short-term programs that focus on areas that are really critical in our world, like technology and healthcare and other skills, trade skills, then I think that, it's going to make a huge difference with how education evolves in our country and individuals are able to do something in the education space that maybe they didn't think that they were cut out for. They probably were, but they, weren't sure. And so this gives a great foray into that when it could lead to outstanding opportunities for their future.
Yeah, and I think that's a important point, just that this can really happen at any time during a person's life. I think about my middle brother. He um was an English major in college, and then in his very last semester, he took like a programming class and really loved it. And actually, after he got his 4-year degree, he went back to our local community college and
Mm.
got his associates in computer science, and that like wound up being a really like great fit for him. And even
Yeah.
just like it's been interesting seeing his career, how he's had to think of like computer science. There's like just so many like touch points for learning like new
Oh, for
programming
sure.
languages and
Hmm.
learning, just and, like especially now with like AI, it's been like very like interesting to see that journey. But it definitely was not like the kind of like very linear type of like
Hmm.
journey that we think of when we think of higher education, where it's just like 4 years,
Right.
a job, and then you retire after X number of years at your job, and that's pretty linear. It's a
Hmm.
little bit more complicated than that.
Absolutely. Yep.
Um, I guess speaking of this alignment between college and the future of work, I read a recent op-ed you wrote where you talked about this a little bit. One of the lines that stood out to me was a question you posed in this op-ed, and it was, higher education is serving many learners and serving many of them very well, but is it serving all learners? I'm just kind of curious for you to elaborate on this question, which I think is really
Yeah.
important.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, when I worked at a university for a long time, and I was so passionate about the work that we did and opening up access and getting students to college, but um, not every student was able to be as successful as we wanted them to be, and sometimes, they just weren't ready, and I think that there's a lot to be said for that. Excuse me, because our systems are really designed for that 18-year-old traditional student that's graduated from high school and comes to us. And some of those students, they want to do something else ahead of time. And then coming back, it's really difficult if you have a family or you're already working full time. And so I think that there's just a lot of opportunity for us to broaden the perspective of what higher education is and what it does for individuals. Online's done that tremendously for so many students, but we need to think about that, all the different populations, from working populations to parents who are definitely working as well, our veterans, those that are in rural communities that are can't can't leave and they're serving in that community or working with their families. We have first generation students who may want to get started, but they aren't sure how to go about it, and they want kind of an intro. So there's just so much that I think can be done for some different flexible, affordable pathways. It's even for 18-year-olds who, are just not sure that going to college and doing this right away is the right thing for them. I'm a true believer in higher education, so I'm not trying to dissuade anyone for not going when it's their time, but when it's their time, so that they can really get the service that they need. And to do that, institutions are going to have to change up the way that they offer services and support to students outside of the traditional 4-year degree programs, just to make sure that there's that connection because you want them to be dedicated, excited alums when they graduate, no matter what age or no matter what program.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it sounds like, just going back to the Workforce Pell, I think I agree. I think what's
Hmm.
exciting
Hmm.
about that is it provides like actual funding for some of these, alternatives that, higher ed can be, real leaders in bringing, more and more of these types of opportunities to
Hmm.
market for students, which I think
Yeah,
is exciting and probably just an opportunity just to, continue to build trust with the public at
right.
large. Um, one, I
Agreed.
guess, like slight concern I have, and I guess to preface, think awesome to have more options for students. I love that. I think one concern is that that could be more complexity in an
Hmm.
environment where you know a lot of students like may not have sufficient access to college guidance. We know, there's a many school districts in the country have a guidance gap where there's just a way, many students for each counselor. I'm just kind of curious how how you think about that concern of like more options but more
Hmm.
complexity for students.
Gosh, you are so right. I have so many friends that are counselors in schools or independently, and just the amount of work that is put upon them is so huge. I mean, in our schools that are public schools mainly, they can have up to 800 or 1,000 students that they are in charge of just for their that to support them through a variety of things. And there may be one college counselor for every senior, um, or for all seniors, not for each one, of course. Yeah, it's very difficult. I am always in awe of them because they have so much to learn. At the U of A, we had a counselor advisory board, and they would fly in or drive in to learn about everything. And I mean, we're just one institution, and we're trying to sell them on that and help them understand that. But there's so much that's out there, where every institution is a little bit different, but there's also all the other options that we've been talking about. And so, yeah, I do really worry about that. I think that there's great um, kinds of things that are happening, like with your organization and sharing information in ways like this. There's other groups that are out there doing similar. I know in Tucson and Phoenix and Flagstaff, that's in Arizona. Those three cities, we have regional college access centers that are really trying to do a lot to get out there. Education Forward's another group, and so there's other nonprofits that are trying to get out there to share information. And so really being able to find ways that we can weave these things together so that it isn't all up to our poor counselors that are trying to do so much work. And so really spreading that wealth with other support throughout communities, because the a lot of the help is there. It's just being able to connect everyone and make sure that we're utilizing those things as well as we can.
Yeah, I think that's yeah, appreciate you calling out some specific organizations. I know yeah, that's it's a challenge though, and I think especially for you think about like different like like rural places, and I think on like one hand there's
Mhm.
been more attention to that through initiatives like the Stars College Network, but just
Mhm.
there are places where just like
Yeah.
there's not a lot of you know infrastructure, just because they're just less dense places. So I
Right.
hope that yeah, there's also like different types of digital solutions,
Absolutely. Mhm.
scale solutions to help students, because I think it is like a net positive just having these more options. It's not like a one size fits all. It's very personalized and meeting students to like where they are right now. And to your point, post secondary education, college, that's a wonderful thing, but that might be every student might be on a little bit of a different timeline.
Right. Mhm.
Um, I guess if I for the students and parents out there, I'm curious what your take is on, how a student should assess like what option might be the best fit for them and maybe like
Mhm.
what types of questions they should be asking themselves.
Sure. Yeah, I think families should start by really asking, what are working together with their students about what the goals are. What are their goals? What do they value most? And talking about that as a family, getting the ideas from both parents and the students and friends and neighbors and relatives. And really kind of talking about what is the value. Are we looking how much are we looking at cost? How much are we looking at flexibility? Is community really important? What about the career preparation. And so I think those are really important questions to ask. But I think the other important questions to ask are about outcomes and understanding what are those graduation rates and job placement rates. Are there transfer pathways if the starting at a community college is the best thing for the family and for the student. Looking at all the resources that are out there, because there are a lot of resources through the states and counties and that can share data. But then also, I think just having those informal conversations with people who have experienced it already are really important. And so, the asking those questions of people who have been through it. So, it could be an alum, or it could be a family member, it could be a current student. I'm a huge proponent when possible to visit. And if you can visit in person, great. But visiting virtually, so many institutions, both all the way from community colleges through four-year universities, have videos out there to share, what their campus is like, and really trying to understand what that lived experience is versus just the what you're seeing on a website. But really trying to talk with people but you got to ask those questions and really have a good understanding of that. I've had families that would say, this is my kid's dream, and we're going to do a second mortgage on the house, or we're going to sell the car so that they can do this. And so it's really, is that really what you want to do? And let's talk about all this. Is there another way? Maybe this is the dream school, and that's awesome. We want you here, but we don't want you here at the detriment of your family and your finances. And so maybe there's a great transfer pathway, those kinds of things. And so really talking to the institutions as well, I think is a big help to be able to truly understand what the full costs are and what everything looks like outside of cost as well.
Yeah, no, and I think going back to the earlier part of the conversation, just your great comment that you can be happy and really successful at a multitude of institutions, and I think just remembering that
Yeah.
it's not like you have to. And I think that can be the trap that students get into, and I've seen that as a college counselor. Just you're
Yeah.
focused on one school, and you're going to try to back into that, that price, no matter what. And I think for some families that's fine. I think for other
Sure.
families, like
Yeah.
that might not be the best way of going about it. And you kind of fast forward to 4 years. I'm sure just with we'll get to this a little bit later, but you have a parent of a college senior. After you graduate, just the options you have, like very well may be limited by if you have like a ton of student debt, and just like where you can live, like what kind of
Mhm.
job you have to take. And you want to be able to think about the bigger picture, and not just the sort of the 4 years, which is really important, but taking the longer view.
Absolutely. Yep.
Are there, as students are thinking about, looking into, data around earnings, graduation rates, are there any tools or resources that you recommend that are just like kind of good, objective, options, and, maybe like easy for students and families to like understand the data?
Yeah, there's so much out there that it's hard to kind of break through all the noise sometimes. But I think that using the college scorecard is helpful because that's at least it's very
Mhm.
similar across the board. Lots of different sites within different states and organizations will have some. And so speaking with the high school counselor or the community college counselor or the university in the area might be able to direct for more specific in the state. But I would say, just in general, the college scorecard is pretty easy to understand and just kind of get an idea. Um, and then doing your own research, I think, is always key in addition to getting some of the basics.
Yeah, and I love the college scorecard. You can go a little bit more granular on like
Hmm.
earnings by major at specific institutions, and like there is just like overall, like certain overall numbers are, there's some use to them, but you can get more specific to your personal situation or goals. Like
Hmm.
that's going to be even more
It's
helpful.
always more helpful. Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, I think a good call out, just thinking local. And just I think for so many, I think we forget sometimes that so many students are going to college. I forget what the statistic is, maybe, within like X miles of where they, of their home or their high school.
Hmm.
There's gonna be a ton of local opportunities to support them, and scholarships too. I think that's when people ask us about, scholarship strategy, I think like one of the top recommendations is, thinking local, just because those are
Right.
opportunities that are meant to
Hmm.
serve students in those communities.
Yeah. Agreed.
Um, So I know, yeah, you're a parent of a current senior. I know
Mhm.
there are probably a lot of parents listening into this, and curious what advice you would have for the other parents out there, both as
Sure.
a parent and as a admissions
Mm.
professional.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks for that question. I always like to talk about being a mom as my most important role. And then, but yeah, as being both an enrollment leader and a parent, I think that my main advice is to support and not to try to script. And so, really being able to be that supportive arm that is guiding and, of course, offering that understanding of what's really possible and all those kinds of things, but not really trying to script everything out because your path may not look just like your student's path or vice versa. I mean, one of the things that I laugh about is my daughter, she's graduated from college now, but when she was getting ready to go, we bought her the pass for all the sports and it came with a t-shirt. And I was like, look, this, I was so excited because I loved college sports and was all about it. And she was like, Mom, that's probably the most expensive t-shirt you ever purchased because I'm not going to go to one game. And I was like, what? That's part of the whole college experience. But it wasn't hers, right? That wasn't something she wanted to do. She had no interest in that. And she had a great experience, very different than mine, but had a great experience. And so I always think about that as just kind of one silly example of the differences, and so really, I think for parents, the encouragement of trying new things, students branch out so much when they get to college. I mean, I was not a tour guide. I didn't like get into some of the things that as a peer advisor and different things back in my college days and I was really too introverted to even think I could lead a tour. And now I do this for a living, but but I think there's, a lot that you just need to think about in terms of that support, helping them to see their value and getting involved. And it builds resilience and, it really helps to support them, their future careers and how that links back to everything that they might get to do. And so starting those conversations early are really critical though, because as a family, you want to be able to have those early understanding of the finances, if that's going to be a piece of it, what that independence looks like, and those expectations. It all pays off later on, but those are really important things to start early. And it may be that the student is like, that's not the path I want to be on. And so looking at what those alternative paths look like. And I wouldn't be surprised either if, you got to have these contingency plans because oftentimes things change. A student may be fully on a track, but then really want to go and do some specialized type of training or vice versa. So being ready for those changes as well. But support versus scripting is really important.
Yeah, no, I love that. A great takeaway. I'm curious on the topic of finances, not something we're always thinking about at
Mhm.
Scholarships 360. Do you see like what are the more successful ways you see for parents to sort of like address that? I think there, sometimes for students can be like a little bit of like awkwardness just around you don't want to be like prying into your parents' finances necessarily, but at the
Mhm.
same time that is
Yeah.
like obviously very very crucial to your own financial aid package and even just filling out like that price calculator,
Mhm.
financial aid estimates, FAFSA, obviously. So yeah, I'm curious how how a family can sort of set that up for those kind of conversations up for success.
Mhm. Yeah, I think it takes time and research for sure. Being able to look at, key locations where the student might be interested in attending, and what those kind of costs look like, looking at what the average tuition increases look like. Do they have a guarantee for your plan? So once you start, that's going to be your cost. How much does housing increase per year? And so really kind of doing your research is which can take time, like I mentioned. But I think that's the most critical thing is thinking about it in those ways, because there could be some things that you feel like maybe that's out of our reach. But, what does it look like in terms of financial aid? And do they have a program for families under a certain amount of income can attend for um, reduced cost of tuition or tuition free? But then you got to factor in all the other pieces for the cost of attendance. And so, looking at what some of those fees that you might not think about, because oftentimes people just think about tuition. So, looking at kind of that full picture is a really, really important part of that. So, doing research, and you can do that through, the individual institutions that are of most interest, or you can look at some of the other, major sites that are out there that help with college planning, and of course some things like what you're doing, and looking at our scholarships available, what kind of scholarships are available, and how likely is it that I might get a scholarship to help pay for these kinds of things? But it's hard because you don't know what's going to happen, in a few years or what that might look like. But you can kind of get a good idea by doing that research and having a good understanding of what the changes might look like and applying some of your own understanding of scholarships and financial aid.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. I think just also highlights the, complexity of this, just where it's like everyone's price is different. The price is going to change
Hmm.
over 4 years. And like, oh, wait, maybe it takes you 5 years, maybe it takes you
Right.
3.5 years. There's so
Hmm.
many, yeah, so many questions. But yeah, I completely agree. Just like it's kind of an unsatisfying answer. Just like it's, quite a bit of work and research and,
Hmm.
probably some in-depth conversations as a family to sort of suss that out.
Right.
Um, yeah, we are the parents of a 6-month-old, so
Oh,
have been thinking about
congratulations. So
the
fun.
future of higher ed of late, and setting up our 529, and
Uh-huh.
yeah, really. Sorry.
No, I'm just agree. Yeah, it's setting
Yeah.
529. I didn't mention that, but that's another option. Hmm.
Yeah, exactly. So it's exciting, but also I don't know, a little bit daunting just to think about, like, wondering like where is all of this going? Like what is her name's Willa. Where is like what is Willa's like college
Um,
experience going to look like in like
right.
17 years?
Yeah.
So I won't ask you to think quite that far ahead, but what changes do you think we'll see in higher ed over the next like 5 to 10 years? And like where do you think things are going?
Hmm. Yeah, well, I think we'll definitely see much more flexibility. We'll see some opportunities that are growing in online hybrid modular programs, small programs, really helping students to kind of do things on their own terms a little bit more. I know when I was at the university, we had families that asked, "Can my student live in the dorm?" But not go to any classes in person, just do things online. Like, is that a possibility? So just that's just one idea of ways people are thinking about it because they learn better digitally than and they got used to that during the pandemic. And so is there an option for that? The other thing I think that really over the next 5-10 years or so is that the institutions will really be building programs that align much more with workforce needs directly. And so I know that that's always been part of like the plan, but I think that that's going to be something that is really a requirement. And I think that that's where the micro credentials and other stackable pathways and things might be coming into play a little bit more. And so I think that's going to be a really important piece of it that leads to, I think, the next part that's got to be about outcomes and not return on investment. There's going to be very close looking at that. And so having opportunities for students to do things a little bit differently and still meet those goals that they have for their education and ability to earn their living, based on those career outcomes, I think are going to be just those really important pieces will that will guide us over the next 5 to 10 years. So flexibility, workforce alignment, and return on investment.
I'm curious, are there any like colleges that come to mind right now where students can maybe look at a model of like, oh, this is something that we're just going to see like more of in the future? Any, programs that you kind of see as particularly
Yeah.
cutting edge as far as workforce development, for instance, and including like some stackable credentials
Hmm.
within that
Yeah.
experience?
I won't name any specifically because I think that there's so many that are a work in progress right now, and there's so much that's happening around this space. I think there's going to be more and more, that are really fitting this model and working toward this model. But yeah, I don't know that I want to call out any right now that that specifically because I think there's going to if they're doing it well right now, there's going to be some topping of that that's going to be happening. So I think over the next 3 to 4 years, we're really going to see where that's coming out and where that's shining.
Yeah, no, it's definitely an exciting time. And I love especially the stackable credentials, just like the idea that maybe you are a, history major, an English major, or, something in the liberal arts, and you can get like, include, different, coursework that is like very aligned to, digital marketing
Mhm.
or using like AI tools to help with like storytelling or video editing or whatever it might be.
Right.
I think there's, yeah, a lot of really, really, really exciting things happening. So yeah, I
Hmm.
think on the whole, like 17 years from now, I'm probably more excited than nervous,
Yeah,
for what higher ed will look like. But trying to like put aside like, it probably will be even like different than I'm imagining, and things will just yeah, I think change in hopefully a positive way that benefits learners and students.
absolutely. Yeah, it's exciting. I think it really is exciting. My son's, as a senior now, he is manager for the baseball team, and he went into that knowing that he wants to go into working for the MLB to do data analysis someday. And so he's,
Cool.
that's all of his experience while he does his coursework in a variety of areas. He's pieced together a major that brings together work in community development and leadership and innovation with data as a minor. And so he's piecing all these things together so that he could kind of create the major that made the most sense to him, because if it doesn't work out to do that part, he wants to have his degree to do other things, but in that industry. And so it's pretty cool to see like the connections that are coming together with that, and his ability to learn so much through a volunteer position or internship kind of program with the baseball team while going to class and figuring out how he compare it, put it all together. Sorry.
Yeah, that's like kind of the storytelling. That's such a valuable life skill. I like when you mentioned that, I just like kind of glance over my bookshelf. I have Moneyball like right
Yeah,
next to me. It's like absolute favorite
one of the
books.
favorites. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yep,
I think something that's like, even though it's a little bit, it's quite a few years old. I relatively recently reread it, and it holds up pretty well.
yeah,
Um, yeah. Oh, that's so cool. And yeah, I love stories like that where, that's college unlocked, like that's an
hmm
experience that it unlocked
hmm
for your son. That's probably like
yeah,
fun and fulfilling. You make friends, but is also
hmm
potentially something that's very
yeah.
beneficial when thinking about your career.
And I did talk about this in the evolution article that you mentioned, but he has all of his classes online. He loves to learn online. He doesn't have any classes in person. So he's on campus every day to work, and then he has his classes online, and then he has baseball. And so it's just an interesting kind of test case for a lot of the things that we've been talking about to kind of make things work for you. Like he had to figure that out though. It wasn't necessarily what was packaged for him or an opportunity, but he found that. And so I think it's just that's the way of the future, to be able to put all these things together that make the most sense for your life to get the skills and the development that you need before you graduate.
Yeah, no, for sure. Just yeah, that mentality of like being able to go a little bit off script and having like the confidence and like I guess a little bit of like the discipline of just being able to like do all of this yourself. Like totally agree. I think will be an even more useful like skill to have.
Mhm.
Which is, and yeah, definitely encourage everyone to check out that article. It's very, very interesting. And yeah, very, very cool just like getting to learn about more about your family and your son's
Yeah.
experience. 'Cause that's,
Thanks.
yeah, yeah.
Hopefully that wasn't too much about it, but
No, no, I think that's examples are helpful, and yeah, I think it's just cool to see someone actually putting it all together like that. Versus just like kind of thinking about this in the abstract, which I think sometimes can be tough. But
Mhm.
yeah, this has been great, Casey. Thank you so much for the time. I think
You're
there's
welcome.
a lot of like really great insights for students and families, just as they think about then the next couple of years and some of the like actionable things they can do right now, and then also I think some really like great insight just to like what the peering into the crystal ball a little bit of what the future has in store for us. Thanks so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It was great to be here.